Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Tet Vav. We're on Yud Dalid Amud Bet at the Mishnah that teaches Nitmet Achat Min HaChalot or Echad Min HaSedarim. In the previous Mishnah, we talked about the case where one has pigul intention regarding one of the Sedarim, but now we're going to talk about what happens if one of them becomes Tameh. So two cases. If you have the halot of the Shtei HaLechem on Shavuot, and one of them becomes Tameh, the other one is Tahor. Or for the weekly lechem hapanim, and you have two sedarim of 6 loaves each, and one of the sedarim becomes tameh. What do we do with the rest of the korban, with the other loaf or with the other seder? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shenehem yesu lebet haserefa, she'en korban sibur haluk. Rabbi Yehuda says that both of the, let's talk about the case of chalot, both of the chalot have to be taken outside of the temple courtyard to be burnt. Of course, the one that's tameh, the Kohanim cannot eat it. Of course, that has to be burnt. But Rabbi Yehuda says even the other one, that is tahor, has to be taken out to be burnt, because they form one set. Here's his rule: korban sibur cannot be divided. You can't say, oh, it's half good and half not good. This is a korban sibur, a communal offering. Both of them, the weekly showbread and the shtei lechem on Shavuot, are on behalf of the whole community. And you can't split it and say half is okay and half is not okay. And since half is tameh, the whole thing gets burnt. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim, however, say, Chachamim omerim, hatameh v'tumato, v'tahor yachel. The tameh loaf, that remains tameh and you have to burn it. It's true. But the tahor one, that remains pure. So let the Kohanim eat it. Amar Rabbi Elazar, machloket lifnei zerika, aval lachar zerika divrei hakol hatameh v'tumato v'tahor yachel. Rabbi Elazar explains this Mishnah and says the machloket is only talking about a case where that one seder or one challah became tameh before the zerika. Zerika, that would refer to halot, where you have the sprinkling of the blood. Together with the 2 halot on Shavuot, we have the 2 kevasim, and you designate everything, and then once you perform the zerika, then that's it. That is the matir for the halot. And so he explains that the machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim is only before zerika. If one of them becomes tameh, then according to Rabbi Yehuda, both of them are taken out to be burnt. And Chachamim say, no, you could still continue with the other one, that is tahor. However, after zerika, everybody agrees. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that while the tameh one remains in tum'ah and has to be burnt, the tahor one can be eaten. Why? What's the difference between before and after? Well, after you do the zerika, you completed the necessary stages of the korban. And so at that point, good, you fulfilled the obligation of the korban, you did the zerika. Now, the Kohanim may eat the lechem mitzvah, they should eat it. Okay, but what if they don't? One of them became tameh. All right, so burn the tameh one, and the other one, fine, you can eat it, because the korban has already been performed properly. So after the zerika, that's where you have after the zerika, everybody agrees that yes, you can eat the tahor ones. Before the zerika, that's a problem. That's more problematic because you have not yet done the sprinkling to achieve the korban. And so there, the Yehuda says, no, start all over again. Burn everything. You got to start all over again. Hachamim, however, say, no, it's okay. You can continue and eat only the one that's tahor. Now, the machloket Rabbi Elazar just said is about before the zerika. So what is the essence of their machloket? Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa is going to give a proposition, and then we're going to challenge it from 3 different arguments. So he explains, Besis meraseh al achilot kamipalge, whether the seats that the Kohen Gadol wears will effectuate acceptance regarding things that are eaten. Now, we know that the seats will help out when something becomes tameh, something that is supposed to be sacrificed on the mizbeach. Something is supposed to be sacrificed, and turns out it was tameh, and it was sacrificed. What do? Oh, we have a coverall. The seats will atone for that and say, you know what? Even though it's tameh, and you should not have put it on the mizbeach, but you put it on the Mizbeach, b'diavad, the seat says it's acceptable. Okay, so that everybody agrees is okay regarding things that are burnt on the Mizbeach. But what if does the seats also make acceptable the parts of a korban that are eaten, like the loaves, shtehalechem, or the sedarim? Does it also take effect on the things that are eaten? Rabbanan say yes. It's fine for the things that are eaten also. And therefore, even before the zirika, one of these sets became tameh. Okay, but the other loaf or the other set of loaves are tahor. Okay, so the seats will atone for even that which became tameh, and you can go ahead and you can continue, and if you sprinkle the blood, it's okay, it will be an acceptable korban. Still, you can't eat the tameh one, but the tahor one you can eat, and you go ahead. Rabbi Yehuda says no. The seats, yes, he agrees, it will make atonement and make acceptance for something that's burned on the Mizbeach, but not for things that are eaten, and therefore the halot are something that's eaten, and it became tameh before the zirika. No good, you cannot continue. You got to throw them all out. The seats is not going to help you there. Amar de Rav Huna bered Rav Natan de Rav Papa v'ha olin de'asis meraseh al ha'olin upelige. Rav Huna, the son of Rav Natan, challenges Rav Papa. This is the first challenge against Rav Papa. It says, what about olin? Even things that go upon the Mizbeach, where there we say that the seats does make acceptance regarding things that are placed on the altar. And yet, there is still a machloket in that case. What's the machloket? The Tanya. Nitma echad min bazichin. Rabbi Yehuda omer shenehem ya'asu betumah. When you have the lechem apanim, and you're supposed to burn the two bazichim, the two bowls of frankincense. So that's something that's placed on the mizbeach, both of them. And now one of them became tameh. What are we going to do now? Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what? Burn both of them. It's okay, because the seats, well, he doesn't say why. He says because you do both of them. He says why? Lefi she'en korban sibur haluk. Same principle as he said in the Mishnah. It's because the korban sibur is not made divided. You don't say you do one and not the other. Hachamim omrim hatameh betumato v'hatahor betahorato. Hachamim say, no, if you have the shteh lechem and you have the two bowls, one became tameh and one remains tahor, the tameh remains tameh. You can't sacrifice that one. But the tahor remains tahor, so you can go ahead and sacrifice the tahor one. Good. Now, what's the point for us? That when we say sitz meratzeh, even for things that go on the mizbeach, that's only b'di avad if you did it already. But you can't do it lecha techila. And here, the Yehuda says, lecha techila, knowing that one of them is tameh, go ahead, lecha techila, and burn both of them on the mizbeach. If his reasoning was that, because the seats is meraseh, then he would have only said it b'di avad. But here he says lecha techila. And actually he says his reason, because you cannot divide them. That's Yehuda's reasoning. You can't divide them. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda his reasoning is not because seats meraseh here, and therefore that's not his reasoning above either. It's not because in the case of the eaten things, the seats does not meratzeh. It makes no difference if it's something eaten or something put on the mizbeach. Rabbi Yehuda is always going to say that you don't divide. Whatever you do with one, you have to do with the other. ועוד אמר רב אשת, השמה, רבי יהודה אומר, אפילו שבט אחד טמא, וכל השבטים טהורין, יעשו בטומאה, לפי שאין קורבנות ציבור חלוק. Furthermore, Rav Ashi has another challenge against Rav Papa, because we learned in a Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda says that if even one of the Shevatim became Tameh, all the other Shevatim, even though they are Tahor, they can perform Korban Pesach B'tumah. So we know the law of Korban Pesach, if most of the whole community is Tameh, they don't have to wait till Pesach Sheni, they can do Pesach Rishon. And now Rabbi Yehuda's chidush is that even if 11 of the 12 tribes is Tohar and one tribe is Tameh, so of course that tribe can perform the Korban Pesach Betumah, but because in Korbanot Sibur Haluk, we don't make distinctions when it comes to Korban Sibur. Once permission is granted to one tribe to perform while they're Tameh, that applies to all the tribes. Anyone who's Tameh can go ahead and do Korban Pesach. Now in this case, the seats meratzeh does not apply, because the whole law of the seats of the Kohen Gadol making acceptance is only when the item is tameh, the korban is tameh, not when the people are tameh. It doesn't apply to people. And yet, Rabbi Yehuda here applies his reasoning also to people, because and korban sibur chaluk. So you see that this principle that he has is an independent principle. It does not depend on the seats applying to it or not applying to it. In this case, the seats does not apply to it, and yet he still says the same law. ועוד האמר רבינה, תשמע, נטמאת אחת מן החלות או אחת מן הסדרים, רבי יהודה אומר שניהם יסעו לבית השרפה, לפי שאין הקורבן ציבור חלוק. חכמים אומרים הטמא בטומאתו והטהור יאכל. And Ravina says, just read our Mishnah. Our Mishnah tells you his reasoning explicitly. That's our case, where one of the halot became tameh, or one of the sederim. Rabbi Yehuda says both of them have to be burnt, because korban sibur, we don't divide them. You have to do the same thing with both of them. If one is tameh, it has to be burnt, the other also. Hachamim say, no, you burn the tameh one, and the tahor one you can eat. Rapapa, if you're right that the reasoning is because of the seats, then the Mishnah should have said so explicitly, because the seats does not atone for, does not make acceptable things that are eaten, only things that are burnt. But the Mishnah does not say that. It gives the reason. Rabbi Yehuda has an independent reason, because we do not make separations and divisions when it comes to korban sibur. Ela amar Rabbi Yochanan, Talmud aruch hu befiv shel Rabbi Yehuda, shen korban sibur haluk. Rather, Rabbi Yochanan gives the straightforward explanation, not like Rav Papa, who was trying to connect the one principle with another principle. No, rather, this is Talmud aruch. This is a settled tradition that Rabbi Yehuda had, an oral tradition that he learned, that when it comes to korban sibur, you do not make divisions, and you can't say part of it is okay and part of it is not okay. If part of it becomes tameh, then the whole thing we treat and with the same law. Next Mishnah, Hatoda mefagelet et halechem, ve'alechem eno mefagel et hatoda. When someone brings a korban toda, they bring an animal, and they also bring 40 loaves of different types. 10 of them are chametz, 30 of them are not chametz. They're from different types of matzot. When someone has pigul intention regarding the meat of the todah, that will also cause the bread to become pigul, but not the other way around. If one has intention regarding the bread, it will not cause the meat of the todah offering to become pigul. Kesad, what's an example? Shachadet hatodah lechol mimena lemachar hi ve'alechem mefugalin. If while doing shechita of the animal, of the korban todah, one has in mind that he's going to eat from the meat of the animal tomorrow. A korban todah is a type of shilamim, however, it has a stringency in that it can only be eaten that day and that night, not the next day. Most of it can be eaten by the owners. Part of it goes on the mizbech, part of it goes to the kohanim. And so, when he has in mind that he's going to eat of the meat tomorrow, then that's past the time. That's pigul. So certainly the meat is pigul. If someone eats that meat, they'd be liable karet. But that applies not only to the meat, but also the bread that comes with it. The loaves that come with it also are pigul. If someone eats of the loaves, it's part of the korban, and would also be liable to pigul, to karet. And however, lechol min alechem lemachar ve'alechem mefugal ve'atodah ena mefugelet. If while doing shechita of the animal, he has in mind he's going to eat the loaves on the next day, then the loaves alone become pigul and would be liable to karet if they're eaten. However, the meat of the animal is not liable to pigul. Another example, hakebasim mefagilin et halechem v'alechem eno mefagil et hakebasim. When you bring on Shavuot the shteh halechem, you also bring 2 kebasim together with it. And pigul intention regarding the animals will cause the bread, the 2 lechem, to become pigul, but pigul intention regarding the breads will not make the animals pigul. Kesad hashochet et hakebasim lechol mehen lemachar hem ve'alechem mefugalin lechol et halechem lemachar alechem mefugal v'hakebasim enan mefugalin. If while doing shechita, one has in mind that one's going to eat the meat of those kebasim tomorrow, has to be an also. These are that day and that night only. That's past the time. So then, not only is the meat, but also the 2 loaves become pigul. If anyone eats of any of them, they're liable to karet. However, if he has in mind while doing shechita on the animal only that he's going to eat the loaves tomorrow, then the loaves have pigul status, but the animals do not. The Gemara now asks, "My ta'ama? What's the reason for this Mishnah?" Ilema mishum derav kana, damarav kana, minayin lelachme todah shenikru todah, shenemar vikrib al zebach hatodah halot. Maybe it's because of what Rav Kana said, because he said that, how do you know that the bread of a korban todah, the 40 loaves, the loaves themselves are called todah? When you say todah, it can certainly refer to the animal, but the word todah also can include the loaves. How do you know? Because the pasuk in Vayikra says, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanks, offering loaves. So it says, Vikriv al zebach hatodah halot. So together with the sacrifice of todah also brings halot. But from the fact that todah and halot are back to back, so todah, halot. You see that halot are included in the general word of todah. Therefore, if he has in mind that he's going to eat the meat outside, that's todah. Oh, but that includes the halot as well. We ask about that reasoning. Well, if todah, if halot are included in todah, if halot are called todah, then isn't todah also called halot? If these words are interchangeable, then the other way around also should be. If one has in mind of pigul regarding the halot, that also the animal meat also should become pigul. But that's not what the Mishnah says. That's not a problem, because you have many words, but they have a more inclusive word and a less inclusive word. You have, apples does not include fruit, even though fruit includes apples. So too here, lechem is called todah. Lechem is included in the word todah. When you say todah, that can refer to the lechem also. Todah can have a specific meaning of the animal itself, but can have a broader meaning, korban todah. So the lechem can be called todah. But todah is not called lechem, meaning when you say just the lechem, that means that the lechem, you're never going to refer to the animal, the meat of the animal, with the word lechem. That you don't find. So therefore, the halacha works one way, but not the other. Okay, so that's okay. That's a good explanation for korban todah. So while that reasoning of Rav Kana works for korban todah, it will not work for the shtei halechem of Shavuot, because the Mishnah teaches that if one has pigul thoughts regarding the kevasim, the 2 lambs that are brought on Shavuot, then it will also cause the 2 breads of Shavuot to become pigul. But if it has pigul thought about the breads, it does not cause the meat of the animal to become pigul. Well, if you have that reasoning of Rav Kahana, well, then we should look for a similar reasoning for the shtei halechem. But where do we ever find that lechem is called kebasim? That you don't find. You don't have a pasuk that has those words back to back like you do in korban todah. So therefore, that can't be the reason for korban todah either, because it doesn't apply to the other example in the Mishnah. Lechem gelal todah, ven todah gelal de lechem. Lechem gelal de kebasim, ven kebasim gelal de lechem. Rather, this is the reason that bread, gelal is short for biglal. The bread comes because of the korban todah. Korban todah is the primary thing, and once you bring the korban todah, then you also have to bring the bread with it. It comes with the animal. So since the bread comes with the animal, and therefore if you have pigul status regarding the animal, the bread also become a pigul. But the todah is not biglal the lechem. The todah is not secondary to the bread, and therefore, if you have in mind pigul on the bread, it will not affect the todah. And also, lechem gelal de kebasim. The lechem will become permitted because of the kebasim. Actually, on Shavuot, the main thing that you want to bring is, in fact, the shtei halechem. You're celebrating the new wheat. And then you bring kebasim, you make it special. But even though the main reason you're bringing it at all is to celebrate the wheat and the lechem, nevertheless, the lechem only becomes permitted once you do the kebasim. So in that sense also, the lechem is included in the kebasim. Yes, so therefore if you have pigul's idea regarding the kebasim, it will make the lechem also pigul, but the kebasim is not because of the lechem. Kebasim won't be permitted just because you brought the lechem. And therefore, pigul status on the lechem affects only the lechem and not the kebasim. Usirichi. Now why does the Mishnah even need to teach us both of these examples? Couldn't I learn one from the other? Diashminan toda, hatam hu deki mefagel belechem la mefagela toda, mishum delohus keku zelaze bitnufa. If I only had the korban toda, then I would say, in that case, when you have pigul intention regarding the bread, it will not make the korban toda pigul, because when you do tenufa with the korban toda, you don't have to do them together. If you didn't do them together, that's okay. And so therefore, since you don't have to do the tenufa of the meat together with the bread, so you see that they are independent, and that's why you might think that's why you might think that in that case, intention of the bread will not affect the meat. But regarding the kebasim on Shavuot, where you have to bring the kebasim together with the bread, and you wave them all together. Since you must wave them all together, they become unified, they become one unit, and I might think that therefore, since they're all one unit through the waving together, therefore, if one has pigul intention for the lechem, also the kebasim become pigul. But that's not true, so that's why I need both of these examples in the Mishnah to teach me that not only regarding korban todah, but even regarding the kebasim, intention regarding the lechem will not make the meat pigul. Be'amine Rabbi Elazar merav hashochet et hatodah le'echol kezayit mimena u'melachma lemachar mahu. Rabbi Elazar asks Rav a question. If someone does shechita on the korban todah animal with intention to eat a kezayit from the meat and the bread together tomorrow, right? A kezayit made up of a part of the meat and part of the bread, half a kezayit of the meat, half a kezayit of the bread, and all that he's going to eat tomorrow. What is the outcome? Li pagule todah lami ba'yali. Hashta kulo milachma lamipagela, mimeno milachma mibaya. So I'm not asking a question about the meat of the todah. That for sure will not become pigul, because even if I have in mind that the entire bread, all of the loaves of the bread, I'm going to eat tomorrow, the meat would not become pigul. That's what the Mishnah taught. So then, if I split it and have only chatzi, only part of the bread and part of the animal, then certainly the meat is not going to become pigul. Meaning it would be stronger if I have all of the kezait in one of them. And so that's a stronger case to say, well, that's pigul. Then, even if you would say in such a case that the meat became pigul, but you don't say in such a case the meat becomes pigul, then all the more so if it's only part this and part that, which is weaker, certainly the meat itself would not become pigul. I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about the bread. Does the intention regarding the meat join together with the intention of the bread to make the bread pigul, or do we say, no, you're joining together two different things, and these are two different things, and then therefore they don't join together, they're not one? Amar le, af bezo halechem mefugal v'atodah ena mefugelet. Rav said, even in this case, the bread will become pigul, but not the korban todah. The bread is more likely to become pigul because when you have the meat, the bread becomes pigul, but if you have intention for the bread, the meat does not become pigul. So he says here, you have in mind the kezait all together. So yes, they do join and combine together to make the lechem pigul, but not the meat. We challenge this answer of Rav. Ve'amai lema kal vachomer umat todah hamefagel en mitpagel haba lefagel velo pigel en odin shelo yitpagel. We can argue against Rav with a kal vachomer. If the korban todah, which causes pigul, it actually is successful, that kezayit from the korban todah is successful in making the lechem pigul, yet the meat itself is not pigul, then the bread, which tries to make the meat pigul by trying to join in, having a part of that also, a hefek kezait, and is not successful, then all the more so that bread should not become pigul. In other words, if the meat which successfully causes pigul to the bread, that meat does not become pigul, then the bread which is not successful in causing something else, the meat to become pigul, it itself also should not become pigul. That would be a challenge against Rav. Wait a second. Can we say a kavachomet like this? In a parallel case, let's try out that kavachomet also. V'hatanya ma'aseh be'achad shezara kalmo shel chavero semadar. ובא מעשה לפני חכמים ואסרו את הזרעים והתירו את הגפנים. We have a case where someone owned a vineyard and someone else came and he planted in his friend's vineyard. The vineyard was budding, and so the owner of the vineyard, he's very happy. He has his vines, they're totally permitted. Someone comes without permission of the owner of the vineyard and puts other plants there, which will make it kilayim. Now the case came before Chachamim, and they said, what should we do? The vineyard owner said, I never wanted this guy to come put other seeds in my vineyard. What, now he comes and makes my stuff prohibited? Is that allowed? What's his penalty? And so they said, you know what? The zira'im, the other things that he planted are prohibited, that you can't benefit from that. But the vines are permitted, because you never wanted the other things there, so the vines you can still have. That was the solution. Ve'amai, how could they say that? Lema kava chomerhu, u'ma ha'oser eno ne'esar, haba le'esor ve'lo asar eno din she'lo yitaser. How come the rabbis permitted it in that case? If you think that this kavachomed is valid, then you can apply the same kavachomed in that case. Something that comes to prohibit and yet did not become prohibited, that's the vines, they are causing a prohibition. Both cases are talking about two things that if when combined, they will both be prohibited. They can prohibit each other. So here, where the vines being together with the seeds cause the seeds to become prohibited, yet the vine itself does not become prohibited. That was their ruling. But that doesn't make sense, because then the other seeds which come to make prohibited the vines, but were not successful, so all the more so the seeds should not become prohibited. So how could you say that the seeds are prohibited and the vine is okay? So if you're not going to say the kavachomed here, then we have to reject it above as well. We answer, Hachi hashta, these two cases are different. Hatam kanabos veluf asra Torah ditnan. Haita sedeu zerua kanabos veluf. Lo yehe zoreya al gabehem. Sheno sot shalosh shanim. Shar zerei midrabanan hu dasireh. Hai David isura kansua rabanan. Hai de la David isura la kansua rabanan. Avalacha lema kavachomer. And the answer is that the cases are different. In the case of the kilayim, these plants, hemp and arum, that's what the Torah said is prohibited mid-deoraita, as the Mishnah says in kilayim. If one's field was sown with kanbos and luf, with hemp and arum, then he cannot plant on them because they produce yield once every 3 years, so it's going to be prohibited during that time. However, other seeds are only asur midrabanan. Okay, so since it's drabanan, so we can be lenient. And in this case, when the friend came and put seeds in the other person's vineyard, he put something that was only midrabanan. Therefore, the person that made a prohibition, that's the friend, the rabbis made a knas and say, no, what you did is prohibited. You can't benefit from it. But the vineyard owner, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just sitting there minding his own business. He just wanted vines. He didn't do violate any prohibition. So the rabbis did not make a knas. Since the whole prohibition was Rabbanan, the rabbis themselves could decide to apply it to one person and not to the other person. So that's why we don't say the kava chomed in the case of kilayim, because it's all to Rabbanan. But back in the case over here of the having in mind the korban todah, hefek hazayit of the korban todah and hefek hazayit of the breads, there we can say the kava chomed. So there's nothing wrong with this kava chomed, even though you would not apply it to this Rabbanan case. It's a Rabbanan case, but the kava chomed itself is in fact valid. Okay, vika dematni la akebasim. Just now, we applied this discussion to the case of a Korban Todah. However, there are those who apply this whole discussion to the case of Shtei HaLechem and the Kebasim on Shavuot. Ba'amine Rabbi Elazar Merav. Rabbi Elazar Esrav. Hashochet et kebasim lachol kezait mehen umilachman mahu. Someone does shechita on the kebasim of Shavuot to eat a kezait from the meat of the kebasim and the breads that come along with it. One kezait altogether, part from the meat, part from the loaves. What do we say in that case? Li pagule kebasim la kami ba'yali. Hashta kulo milechem la mipageli. Mehenu milachman mibaya. Rabbi Elazar explains his question. He's not asking about whether the meat becomes pigul, because even if all of the bread became pigul, he had in mind regarding all of the bread, still only the bread will become pigul and not the meat. So in this case, when it's only part of this and part of that, all the more so, the meat will not become pigul. That's a simple case. Ki mabibayali ipagule lechem. Mi mistarefi kebasim lipagule lechem or la. My question is whether the bread becomes pigul. Do you combine that half a shiur in the meat together with the pigul of the lechem, and they join together to make the bread pigul or not? And the Rav answers, Amar le, af bezo, halechem mefugal v'kebasim enan mefugalim. In this case also, the bread, just like in the case of the Mishnah, the bread becomes pigul, but the animal does not become pigul. So yes, it does combine together to make the bread pigul. And now the Gemara asks, Ve'amai, lema kal v'chomer, umah mefagel eno mitpagel, haba lefagel v'lo pigel, eno din shelo yitpagel. We should ask this kal v'chomer. If the thing that's coming to make it pigul, that is the animal, the chatzi shiur in the animal, which comes to cause pigul, the meat itself does not become pigul, then the breads which come to try to make pigul, if they would combine, they could try to make pigul to the meat, but it doesn't work. So then they're weaker. So all the more so that they should not become pigul. So that would be a challenge against the answer of Rav. But now the Gemara says, wait a second, this kal v'chomer itself, should we apply such a kal v'chomer? V'tanya, maseh bechad shezara kalmo shel chavero smadar v'chule. Ve'amai lema kal v'chomer ma oser eno ne'esar habales v'lo asar eno din shelo yitaser. If we apply this kal v'chomer, we have to apply it also in the case of this beraita, of the friend that comes and plants in the vineyard of his friend. And the rabbi said that the vineyard is okay, the vines of the vineyard are okay, but the seeds are, what grows from that is prohibited. Why? Why don't we say the same kal v'chomer, that the vines that come to make prohibited the seeds, nevertheless the vines do not become prohibited, then the seeds which come to make prohibited the vines, but do not work, they don't make it prohibited, all the more so the seeds should not become prohibited. So if you apply that kal v'chomer, it would go against the rabbi's ruling in that baraita. And we answer, Kachi hashta hatam kan bos v'lo fasra Torah she'ar zeraim mitrabanan u'ta'asireh. Hayda avad isura kan surabanan, tela avad isura la kan surabanan. Avalacha lema kal v'chomer. Now in that case, only kan bos and luf are prohibited midoraita, but other seeds are okay, or only asur midrabanan. And the rabbis, they're the ones that decided, and they said we're going to make a kanas on the friend because he violated a prohibition, but the vineyard owner, we are not going to make a kanas. So that's why they decided based on who was guilty or not. But the kal v'chomer, in the case of the Shtei HaLechem, the kal v'chomer still stands, and therefore here also would be a refutation to Rav's answer. Man de matne la toda kol sheken kebasim. Uman de matne la kebasim hu dehuzkeku ze la ze litnufa. Aval toda de lo huzkeka ze la ze b'tnufa la. The one who applies this discussion, the question of Rabbi Elazar and the answer of Rav, who applied it to the toda case, would agree all the more so regarding the case of kebasim. However, the one who applies this discussion to kebasim would say, only regarding the kebasim where they are necessary for each other, they're attached to each other because they are waved all together. The kebasim and the loaves are waved all together, and therefore it makes sense to raise the possibility that having in mind chatzi zait of this and a zait altogether of the bread and the meat would come together, and that's what Rav says. Yes, they do come together to make the lechem prohibited. Yes, Rav would say that, and Rabbi Elazar would raise the question regarding the kebasim of the on Shavuot, where it makes sense that that's likely to come together. Aval todah de lo zkeka ze laze bitnufa la. But regarding the korban todah, where they are not needed for each other for the waving, they're more separated. And in that case, Rabbi Elazar would not even have asked the question. Certainly, the having in mind the kezait of both of them together would not cause them to be together, and the lechem would not become prohibited. Rabbi Abba Zuti ba'e lahachi. Now there's a whole nother version of Rabbi Elazar's question that Rabbi Abba Zuti taught. Be'amine Rabbi Elazar merav. This is what Rabbi Elazar asked Rav. Hashochet et hakebes le'echol kezait mechavero lemachar. Mahu. Chavero keves mashma v'la mefagel, or diama lechem mashma umefagel le. Has to do with the shteh lechem, but it's a case where one is doing shechita on one of the kevasim, having in mind to eat of its friend tomorrow. Now, when it says of its friend or the other, what does it mean? The other keves? If it's that, then it will not cause pigul, because doing shechita on one animal will not cause another matir to become prohibited. And so there would be no problem regarding the other one. Or do we say that lechem, when it says chavero, maybe it means the counterpart of the bread? And if it's the bread, while he's doing shechita of the animal, he has in mind that the bread will become pigul, then the bread certainly does become pigul. So that's his question. What does chavero mean? And Rav has an answer. Amar le'etini tuha, shachat echad min hakebasim lechol mimenu lemachar, hu pigul v'chavero kasher. Lechol chavero mechavero lemachar shenehem kesherim. Alma chavero kebes mashma. We learned it in the Mishnah coming up tomorrow. That said, if you did shechita on one of the kevasim, having in mind to eat from that very lamb on the next day, then that one that he's doing shechita on is pigul. Certainly, it would be pigul. It's the one that he's doing shechita on now. He's having in mind he's going to eat from its meat tomorrow, so that one would be pigul. And the other animal, which he has not involved at all, would be okay. If he had in mind, while doing shechita on lamb A, that he's going to eat mechavero tomorrow, then both of them are okay, because this lamb that he's doing slaughter on, he doesn't have any improper intention regarding that. And the other one is itself a matir. And when you're involved in one matir, you can't make the other matir prohibited as pigul. So what would we see from the language of this Mishnah? Well, he said chavero, and the chavero was referring to the other animal. So that's the answer, first to the other animal, and therefore the lechem is permitted. But we reject this answer. Dilma de parish ve'amar chavero keves. Maybe this Mishnah is talking about when he said chavero, the lamb, the other lamb. He made it clear. The point of this Mishnah was just to teach the distinction between if I have in mind pigul of this lamb that I'm slaughtering or the other lamb. So it said chavero, but he means, what he said is chavero keves. He refers to other lamb, and therefore it's kosher. But the question of Rabbi Elazar was when he said just chavero. What does that mean? Which is just the counterpart, just its friend. Does that mean the animal or the other or the bread? And so we do not. This question is left unresolved. Next Mishnah, hazevach mefagel et hanesachim mishekadshu bakli dibre Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to bring in the nesachim, like for shalamim and korban olah. You have to bring wine also with it and the korban mincha with it. So if one has intention of pigul during the slaughter of the animal, then the nesachim also will become pigul, but that's only when those libations, the oil or the wine or the korban mincha, which consists of flour and oil, only once they are put into a sacred vessel. Before that, they have only consecration by money, kedushat mamon. But after, once you put them in the holy vessel, now they already have kedushat haguf, intrinsic holiness, and therefore they would be subject to pigul because they are associated with this korban. That's what Rabbi Meir says. הנסכים אינן מפגילים את הזבח, כיצד השוחט את הזבח לאכול ממנו למחר, הוא נסחיו מפוגלין, להקריב נסחיו למחר, הנסכים מפוגלין, הזבח אינו מפוגל. Similar to the principle that we saw above, but now we're applying it to other types of korbanot that have nesachim that come with it. If one has improper intention regarding the nesachim, they will not cause the meat of the korban to become pigul. How so? If you're doing shechita on the animal, having in mind that you're going to consume it after the time. If it's a shelamim, not literally macha, but it would be after 2 days. Or if it's a korban olah, it would be to consume it on the mizbeach, on the next day. Then not only the meat of the animal, but also the accompaniment of the wine and the mincha there is totally burnt, also will become pigul. However, if he has in mind that he is going, at the time of he's doing the shechita on the korban, he has in mind that he's going to offer the wine or the meal offering on past the time, then that wine and meal offering will become pigul, but the meat itself will not become pigul. If in terms of if one would eat it, one would get karet for having the wine or the meal offering, but not for the meat. Tenor Rabbanan, nizke behema chayvin alehem mishum pigul, mipnei shedam hazebach matiran likarev, divrei Rabbi Meir. A Braita expands on the Mishnah and explains that the nesachim, the libations that accompany an animal sacrifice, one is liable for them because of pigul. Why? Because the blood of the korban makes them permitted to be sacrificed. We mentioned the principle before that one matir cannot make another matir pigul. But in this case, they're not two matirim. Rather, the blood of the sacrifice is a matir. Only once you sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice, then you can burn the wine and the flour offering that come together with it. So something can become pigul either if it can be consumed, eaten by the people who are allowed to eat it, or something that must be consumed on the mizbeach. Either way, those things can become pigul, but not if they are themselves a matir. Only if there's something else that's a matir that permits them to then be consumed. And so that's the case here, that the blood permits the other items to be sacrificed on the mizbeach, and therefore those items can become pigul. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Amru lo Rabbi Meir, v'halo adam mebim b'zibcho hayom unsachav ad asara yamim. But the rabbis objected to Rabbi Meir and said, there's a halacha that even if you bring your korban shelamim today, you don't have to bring the libations on that same day. You could bring the libations even 10 days later. It could be later, it could be on a different day. And so it's independent from each other. Since they're on different days, you wouldn't say that slaughtering the animal on this day will make pigul the wine, which in any case you could bring in 10 days from now, because the wine, you see, is a separate obligation. And you can't say, I'm going to have in mind to bring the wine in 2 days. But that's okay, because you can bring the nesachim several days after the animal. You have to bring it because once you bring that animal sacrifice, you're obligated to bring the wine libation, but it doesn't have to be on the same day. So why should it cause the meat, intention regarding the meat, cause the libations to become pigul? Amar lehen, afani lo amarti ela bebain oim hazebach. And Rabbi Meir says, no, you're right. I only said this halacha if it's a libation that is coming together with, at the same time as the animal sacrifice. Then, intention during shechita, wrong intention will make the wine to be pigul. But if they're not brought together, then you're right, it will not make it pigul. Amru lo, efshar l'shanoto lezebach acher. And then the rabbis told Rabbi Meir, well, even if you bring them together on the same day, you can still switch it for another sacrifice. You can say this wine, forget this wine. You brought it for this korban A, no, we're going to use it for some other korban. Since you can switch it around, therefore they're not considered connected to each other, and therefore, according to the Chachamim, they do not think that intention during the slaughter will make the nesachim pigul. Amar Rava, kasava Rabbi Meir, hukbe'u b'shchita kelachmei todah. Rava says, how can we defend Rabbi Meir? He must think that once the libations are fixed, are established during the time of shechita, then that's it. They are similar to the lachmei todah, which are just bread, until you say, this bread, we're going to connect it to this korban todah. Okay, and so you connect it together. Once they're designated for each other, then in proper thought during shechita will make the lachmei todah pigul. And so too with libations, if you designate them together, then one will cause the other to be pigul. If you bring it on a separate day, then it won't. So Rava explains that according to Rabbi Meir, must be that once you establish it, they join together just like lachmei todah. Teno Rabbanan, log shemen shel mesorah chayvin alav mishum pigul, mipnei shedama sham matiro liponot divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is going to apply a similar rule to yet another case of a mesorah, who among the various things he has to bring to become tahor is a korban asham and also a log shemen. And the Kohen will take some of the blood of the asham and put it on the body of the mesorah, and also some of the oil and put it on his body. Now you can only apply the oil to his body once you perform the sprinkling of the blood of the asham. So this Baraita says that according to the Rabbi Meir, that log of shemen of a mesorah, one would be liable for pigul if during the time of shechita of the asham, one has in mind that she's going to apply the oil on the mesorah on a different day, past the time. Why? Because the blood of the asham, when you sprinkle that blood, that's a matir. Then you're permitted to bring the oil and apply it to his thumb and his right ear and his toe. That's according to Rabbi Meir. Amru lo Rabbi Meir. V'lo adam evi hashamo hayom v'lu go mikan v'ad asara yamim. So the Chachamim say, no, you can't say that. Improper intention during the asham slaughter is going to make the oil pasul, because you don't have to do it on the same day. You could bring the asham one day, and then he could bring the oil and do that part of the service 10 days later. So they're not connected to each other, and it cannot cause the oil to become pigul. You're right. If he brings it a few days later, then there's no pigul. I'm talking about when he brings it together with the asham. He designates it together. The rabbis challenge him and say, no, even if he brings it on that day, that we can always switch it for a different, take this oil. You designate it has to be done today? Okay, we'll move it. Someone else will bring it who is also required to bring the oil. So it's not called designated only to this. We can mix and match, and therefore will not become pigul. Amar Rava kasava Rabbi Meir hukbe'u b'shchita kelachmei todah. And Rava again explains that according to Rabbi Meir, once they are established at the time of shechita, then they become connected to each other. This oil has to be only for this korban asham, and therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, improper intention during the shechita of that asham will make the oil pigul, just like in lachmei todah. The bread, when it's designated for this korban todah, or also improper intention when slaughtering the korban todah will also make the loaves pigul and prohibited. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.